Good morning. Some years ago, 1957, I watched a play on the telly called The Staring Match, and I've remembered it ever since. It's set in America, in the middle of America, during a drought, and the people there are all in their church praying for rain. Suddenly, a man appears at the entrance, dressed all in white, looking very dapper, has a white cane, and he announces himself as an angel who's been sent to help them. So they have a discussion about this and began to argue about it. And just then another man comes, dressed in black, looking a bit scruffy actually, and he announces exactly the same thing. He's been sent, and he's been sent to help them, and he's an angel. So the two so-called angels keep arguing with each other, saying they're the right one, they're the real one, and the congregation start arguing about it as well. And in the end, the congregation vote that they should have a wrestling match, these two angels, and whoever wins would be the one they would follow. Actually, the angels, or the men, didn't like this idea, and they said instead they would have a staring match, the winner being the one who did not break his stare. So they sat them down, and they sat looking at each other, staring at each other for hours, day and night. Suddenly, one of them began to falter, coughed a bit, and a girl in the congregation ran out with a glass of water. One of the angels, Mr. Black, told her to go back, not to enter the staring zone, but she wouldn't listen. And the moment she entered it, as she brought a glass of water, she fell down unconscious on the ground. Mr. Black broke his stare, got up and went to help the girl. Mr. White then stood up, waving his arms triumphantly, and said, "Right, I am the winner. He broke the stare." But the congregation reminded him they were the judges, and they recognised compassion when they saw it. And they sent Mr. White away. How do we make sense of what is right and what's wrong? What's evil? How can we sum up what we believe in a few simple principles? Is there a simple word or phrase we can use about our faith? Faith, perhaps. We talk about our faith sometimes. Or the Sunday school answer to most questions, the answer is Jesus. Paul tried to sum it up with 3 words, didn't he? Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And we're back to Jesus again, because, of course, God is love. But how can you or I be like Jesus? For instance, walking on the water doesn't seem to be something that we can copy. This is why words like faith, hope and love are so helpful. Today, you can tell from the readings that our focus is on faith. And here's the problem. Christians don't actually speak about faith much. They talk about doing good, because Jesus went round doing good. But we don't talk quite so much about faith as being important. And if you're talking about what is good, it gets even more complicated. How on earth do you define what is good? People have very different ideas of what is good. People argue about what's good. Well, we can perhaps think of a few things that are good, like compassion, like humility, perhaps even just hard work, being fair and just, and many other ideas like this. But when the dictionary makers try to define the word good, philosophers will tell them, and do tell them, that there are actually about 200 quite distinct meanings of the word good. It's all very confusing. Try a thesaurus and look up what words there are that are like good. Perhaps they give us a clue. Here are some examples I found, just the first few I found in a thesaurus about meaning the word good. Bang up, bully, corking, crackling, dandy, great, groovy, neat, not bad, cool, respectable. And a recent one, I've just been told, well sick. All these things can mean good. I began talking about a play I watched in the 1950s. One of the things Christians argue about is whether you should watch plays at all. And at that time, in the church that I attended, the curate's wife told me that plays were evil. And she knew what she was talking about because she'd been trained at RADA. And she said that acting, everything to do with acting, was evil. One of the reasons we sometimes get confused about what is good is that we get distracted by things around us and we don't listen to God. Elijah, that we've just been hearing about, was a very good example. He had confronted the priests of Baal, and God had performed a spectacular put down of the priests of Baal. And everything seemed to be going very well, but then Queen Jezebel sent an icy threat to Elijah. She was going to kill him. And Elijah did what most of us do when we get thoroughly confused and threatened. He had a meltdown. Not a complete meltdown, to be fair. He was not like Jonah, who tried to run off to the ends of the earth, but he went into the desert. But he was still listening to God, and God told him to go to Mount Horeb in Sinai, the place where God had given the people of Israel the covenant and the Ten Commandments. And he then spoke to Elijah, who'd been hiding on Mount Horeb in a cave, and he said to him, "What are you doing here?" And he was, as some of us get sometimes, a bit frazzled and almost childish. And Elijah says, "I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with a sword. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me." God tells Elijah to go out on the mountain, to stand and to wait for him. So Elijah waited, and then there came a great wind that shattered stones, far greater, far stronger than the emotions I would imagine inside Elijah. And then there was an earthquake, and then there was fire, and finally things calmed down a bit, and God said to Elijah, "Go back the way you came." Then God actually put Elijah in charge of things. He told him to sort out all the politics and spiritual matters in the whole area and anoint the rulers and spiritual rulers of Israel and Syria as well while he was about it. What a change in Elijah and his fortunes. Sometimes the Lord seems far off, and we go and search for him in all kinds of places, in a religious place, in a remote place, in a place of significance perhaps where God has been present, like the one in this story. but God speaks from inside us, wherever we are, if only we will listen. God spent thousands of years trying to teach the children of Israel, I should say 1,000 years, what he considered good. During that time, he and Moses came up with their version of what was good. It was the word righteousness, following the law. God also said in Deuteronomy, as a kind of commentary on this, don't go making excuses because the law is somehow too difficult to find and understand. No, the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart, so you may obey it. But then Paul had problems with the obeying bit when it came to New Testament times. He knew from experience it was impossible to obey the law all the time. And Paul said, "For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep doing." Paul understood that no one could actually obey the law, with one crucial exception. Christ obeyed it, fulfilled it, and died for us. The idea of doing good is deeply embedded in our culture because it's an idea we have simply grown up with without questioning it, because it comes from the Christian culture of our country. Recently, as COVID-19 has reared its ugly head, we've been encouraged by seeing certain people doing good. What is sometimes forgotten is that what we call good flows from our society having grown up over a period of time as a Christian country. And I think it's true to say nowadays, to some extent, this country has abandoned that. So the good news that we know is very precious. It's important to understand, I believe, we have all been commissioned to spread it. To sum up what Paul says about evangelism and why it's important, somebody has kind of put what he said in the epistle kind of backwards. Unless people are commissioned for the task, there will be no gospel preachers. Unless the gospel is preached, sinners will not hear Christ's message and voice. Unless they hear him, they will not believe the truths of his death and resurrection. Unless they believe these truths, they will not call on him. And unless they call on his name, they will not be saved. Blessed are the feet that bring good news, Paul says, quoting Isaiah. And I believe it's all our feet that need to be blessed. So, to finish, we come to the gospel reading. From what we've been seen already about the way God operates in the world, we can be sure Jesus was not performing a party trick when he walked on the water. He was on the mountaintop praying for the disciples as they were struggling with the oars in the storm down below, this time without Jesus with them. He sent them ahead on the boat, spent time in prayer, and according to Mark, seems simply to have aimed to get to the next town ahead of them. Since Jesus had just performed his most spectacular, possibly his most spectacular miracle, when he fed 5,000 plus people, he perhaps thought that his disciples would understand when he wanted to take a shortcut. But they didn't understand, and they were absolutely terrified. But Peter took just the tiny bit of faith that he had and stepped out on to the water. And then something happened that I find most encouraging. He failed and began to sink. What do we do when we begin to sink? What should Elijah have done when he was threatened with death? What should we do when we feel as though we're finished and we're not going anywhere? Well, he cried out, "Lord, save me." So Jesus saved him. That's essentially what Jesus does all the time. He saves. What we do is we have to have faith.